Picture this. You're standing among thousands of screaming people, the stench of sweat mixing with beer, and right before your eyes, a man writhing in a noose tightening around his throat, legs thrashing in the air, face turning purple, eyes bulging in horror. But instead of terror, the crowd roars like they're watching the best boxing match of their lives. This isn't a horror movie. This is the blood-soaked reality that unfolded daily at one of history's most notorious locations. A place whose name alone sends shivers down your spine, Tyburn Gallows in London. This is where death wasn't just punishment, it was a grand spectacle, a festival of brutality, where the line between justice and savagery was completely erased. What you're about to hear will make you question, just how cruel were humans in the old days? But before we dive into the gruesome details, let me ask you this. If you were born in 18th century London, would you be the one standing in the cheering crowd, or the one hanging from the gallows? Tyburn, this seemingly harmless name, was actually synonymous with death for over 600 years of London's history. Located at what we now call Marble Arch, one of the most luxurious tourist spots in the English capital, few realize that beneath those modern cobblestones once soaked the blood of tens of thousands of people. Tyburn first appeared in historical records in 1196, but it wasn't until the early 16th century that it truly became England's most infamous execution site. People called it the Tyburn Tree, not because there were beautiful trees there, but because of the unique structure of the gallows. Imagine a massive triangular structure made of oak, each side about 6 meters long, tall enough to be seen from afar. And here's the most terrifying detail. It was designed to hang up to 24 people simultaneously. Yes, you heard that right, 24 human beings writhing in nooses at the same time, like puppets dangling on strings. Can you imagine that horrific scene? This wasn't a design accident, but a calculated decision by the English monarchy. They wanted to maximize fear, to show the people clearly, anyone who defies the king will die this way. But Tyburn wasn't merely an execution site, it was a stage, a theater of death, where state power was displayed in its most naked and brutal form. In an era when justice was enforced publicly and savagely, Tyburn served as a terrifying reminder of the consequences of opposing the crown. From petty thieves to political traitors, all had to undergo the same dreadful ritual. They were loaded onto a horse-drawn cart, then paraded through London's streets amid the jeers and mockery of crowds who treated it as public entertainment. And here's something you might not know. The journey from Newgate Prison to Tyburn was about 5 kilometers, taking roughly 2 to 3 hours. But it wasn't a quiet ride. The condemned had to sit on their own coffin, facing thousands of people lining the streets to curse them, throw garbage, even hurl stones at them. Some lucky ones had family members following, but most endured the contempt alone. Throughout that journey, they knew full well that in just a few more hours they would stop breathing. Can you imagine the desperation in those final moments of life? And when the cart finally stopped at Tyburn, the scene there was even more horrifying than the journey. The crowd could reach 100,000 people on major execution days, nearly the population of an entire small city at that time. They came from everywhere, nobles sitting in luxurious carriages for better views, merchants renting special seats at high prices, while the poor jostled at the front, fighting for the best positions. People sold food, beer, even printed leaflets of the criminal's last confession, though most were fake, made up by publishers to make money. Everywhere was the sound of laughter and drinking, like a bustling fair. Many families even brought their children to watch, considering it a living moral lesson. Can you believe it? Parents back then let their kids watch people being hanged to teach them right from wrong? This was a dark aspect of that era's social culture. Other people's deaths became entertainment for the masses. And what's more terrifying is they didn't feel anything was wrong with that. But there's one character in this entire blood-soaked drama we haven't mentioned yet, the man standing at the fragile boundary between life and death, the one who with just a nod could decide whether someone died quickly or slowly. That was Tyburn's executioner. These men were both feared and despised, yet absolutely necessary in the brutal justice system of the time. They held the ultimate power, the power to grant a merciful death or a departure filled with agony. And here's something very few people know. Executioners weren't paid a fixed salary by the state. Instead, they earned their living mainly from tips from the condemned. Yes, you heard that right. People about to die had to pay money for a quicker death. This was a horrific transaction documented in many historical records. A wealthy death row prisoner could pay a large sum to ensure the executioner would break their neck instantly, rather than letting them suffocate for many agonizing minutes. For those too poor to pay, they could only hope for luck. But the executioner's income didn't just come from those about to die. After an execution ended, the executioner had the right to take the deceased's clothes and personal belongings to sell. And here's something even more macabre. Body parts of the executed were believed to have magical and healing powers. People believed that the rope that hanged someone could cure head ailments, blood-soaked cloth could heal wounds, and even the hand of a hanged person could bring good luck. Executioners sold these items at exorbitant prices to superstitious citizens. Some executions earned the executioner more money than a craftsman made working all year. Despite their important role, executioners were outcasts in society. They were banned from normal work, not allowed in taverns or churches, and usually had to live in isolated areas. Neighbors feared them, children ran away at the sight of them, and even those in the lowliest professions didn't want to associate with them. But on execution days, they became grim celebrities, attracting both fear and curiosity from the crowd. They were the embodiment of state power and death, forever etched in London's bloody folklore. But the story of Tyburn is only beginning, because what happened here was far more horrifying than you think. If you think only common criminals were hanged at Tyburn, you're dead wrong. Tyburn witnessed countless horrific executions, but there were politically charged cases so dramatic that even centuries later, people remember them with haunting dread. One of the most shocking cases was Oliver Cromwell's posthumous execution, a name anyone studying English history must know. Cromwell wasn't an ordinary criminal. He was once England's leader, the man who overthrew and executed King Charles I during the English Civil War. But when the monarchy was restored in 1660 with Charles II ascending the throne, he decided to take revenge in a way that not even death could shield a traitor. In 1661, 3 years after Cromwell died and was buried at Westminster Abbey, he was exhumed. Yes, you heard right. They dug up his corpse, dressed the dead body, and dragged it to Tyburn to execute it again. Can you imagine that scene? A decomposed corpse hung on the gallows before thousands of people, then beheaded like a treasonous criminal. This wasn't an ordinary execution. This was a carefully calculated political message from the newly restored monarchy. Even death cannot shelter a traitor from royal vengeance. After the execution, Cromwell's head was mounted on a pike and displayed atop Westminster Hall, once a symbol of English political power. It stayed there for nearly 25 years, weathered by wind and rain until only a bleached skull remained, a grim warning: this is the fate of those who dare oppose the crown. But the story doesn't end there. After many decades, Cromwell's skull became a bizarre collector's item, passed through many hands, displayed in museums, even auctioned off. It wasn't until 1960, nearly 300 years after his death, that the skull was finally buried properly at Cambridge. But Tyburn's horror wasn't limited to major political figures. Women, though a minority on death row, faced Tyburn's brutal justice in ways that exposed deep inequities in society at the time. One of the most notorious cases was Elizabeth Brownrigg in 1767. She was convicted of brutally torturing and killing her servant girl, Mary Clifford. But this wasn't an ordinary murder. This was months-long torture, so cruel that even people accustomed to Tyburn's bloody scenes shuddered. Mary Clifford was just a young girl, sent to apprentice at the Brownrigg household. But instead of learning a trade, the child experienced hell on earth. Elizabeth Brownrigg, a middle-aged woman with a respectable appearance, was a demon at home. Little Mary was tortured daily, beaten with whips, chained to a dark basement wall without light, starved until her ribs showed. The whip marks on the girl's back were never treated, infection spread, but Elizabeth Brownrigg continued the abuse. Finally, the child died in excruciating agony, her body nothing but skin and bones, covered in unhealed wounds. When the case was discovered, all of London was shocked. People couldn't believe that a woman, though society considered gentle and kind, could be so cruel. Elizabeth Brownrigg's trial became a major event, attracting national attention, and when she was sentenced to death, crowds flocked to Tyburn in unprecedented numbers. They didn't come to watch an ordinary execution. They came to witness justice served on a demon. On Elizabeth Brownrigg's execution day, the crowd became so violent that police had to intervene to protect the cart carrying her. People threw stones, threw feces, screamed curses, and when the noose finally tightened around her neck, the crowd's cheers rose like thunder.